Hey then, good afternoon. My name's Brett Blake and I'll be delivering this Lunch and Learn on reducing waste and improving resource efficiency through Lean. And this is in partnership between the Supply Chain Sustainability School and ELSI International. So this Lunch and Learn is all about providing you with an understanding of what is meant by waste and how it can be identified and what steps can be taken to improve resource efficiency through the removal of waste in our processes. So what do we mean by waste? Well, waste traditionally might be the things we throw away, things that we don't need. What we're going to be looking at today is waste in the things that we do that stops our processes working effectively and efficiency. And we will look at that through our eyes of lean thinking. The board we're using today is a Miro board, and this has the opportunity for you to get involved interactively by adding some of your own points using post-it notes. So if I can just reference the slide in front of you at this moment in time, it just gives you an indication of how to add a post-it note to an area of the board, which we'll come to a little bit later on. Please feel free to add these points either into the Miro board themselves, or if you feel more comfortable, add your comments to the comments chat on the Zoom call, and we can transfer those comments across for you. Okay then. So again, thank you very much for joining us today on this Lunch and Learn, Reducing Waste. And what I'd like to do is talk about, well, what is waste? We look at waste in three defining areas. We look at them as value adding, non-value adding, or waste. So what do we mean by value adding? Well, these are the things that we do that ultimately give a value to what we're delivering to the customer or the person that's receiving either the product or service. So in construction, it may be the finished article, the finished building, the handover of that finished product that we're giving across. So value adding is the stuff that we do that ensures that we deliver what is expected by our end customer. The other element is non-value adding. These are tasks that we carry out that aren't necessarily what the customer wants to pay for or is expected, but they're necessary for us to do what we need to do. For example, constructing scaffolding is something that isn't necessarily value adding to the end product, but it's necessary to get something delivered. And then the final one is waste. This is everything that we do that is not necessary. It's things that may hold up the project schedule. It may be something that we've got wrong within quality, and we have to do it again. So think about all of the different handoffs that we have within a construction project. Think about what is value adding. It's actually delivering a change in the form or function of what we have. Think about the non-value adding, those tasks that we carry out that are necessary, but don't necessarily add to the value of that finished construction or project. And then finally, waste. These are the things that we do because we've potentially got something wrong in the first instance. Now, our challenge with these areas of value add, non-value add and waste is to ensure that we focus our attention in the right areas. So if I reference the pie charts that we have in front there, traditionally, most businesses would focus on just the value add. How can we make things more efficient? How can we do things more quickly? And actually, from lean thinking, we're saying this is possibly the wrong place to focus. Our focus should be on the waste areas, the things that we don't do right, the times where things go wrong, or we have to re-engineer something. So our challenge is to focus on the waste, to remove that, and overall that will improve productivity and efficiency. So this is your opportunity now to share with me what you see as your value adding. So value adding are the things that add form or function to a specific task. Please feel free to add your comments in what you see around you as your value adding. Please feel free to add in the comments there what you see around you as a non-value adding, and also what you see as waste in your activities. So I can see some post-it notes going on there now, and I'll just give you a minute or two to have a look at that. So yes, somebody's put on their transport. So transport can be either a non-value added or a waste. So think about the essential transport to bring materials or equipment into the site. It would be non-value adding potentially to bring it on for us to use, but it could also be seen as waste if we're not bringing the right things in at the right time. Pre-plant checks. So ensuring that those checks are in place to ensure that we can do our task as we've agreed. Yes. Skills use, what else have we got on there? What the customer is willing to pay for. Yes, that is definitely what we need to think about as our value adding. And what we need to be looking at there is around not just what the customer wants, but what the customer needs. And as experts within the construction field, we should be guiding that customer to understand exactly how we can give value to them. Logistics, potentially non-value added. And again, I'll use the example of if we deliver the right thing right first time, it will potentially be seen as a non-value added. But if we were to get the wrong delivery delivered to the wrong place at the wrong time, that for us would be seen as waste. Skills used incorrectly. That's a really key one for us. We've got to ensure that we have the right people in the right place at the right time, trained with the right skills. Shortly, I'll be sharing with you a little bit around the 7 wastes and the 8th waste of skills, so we can have a look at what is value added, non-value added and waste. For the question that's just come up on Zoom, how do I add a sticky note? I'm just going to go back on the slides just to show you. So for those of you that are looking now at the Miro board, if you've signed into the Miro board, the way I've added a sticky note is to identify the sticky note on the left and click that. And then you can identify a colour of sticky note you want to use by clicking that again with the mouse. And then if you put that sticky note where you want it on the canvas itself, and I can then move now that sticky note exactly to where I need it on the canvas. Okay. So waste. This is our opportunity now to see what is actually happening on site. Typically what happens, people will walk past activities without really understanding what is waste, what is value added or non-value added. So I reference here the Tim Woods, and we can see that this is an acronym, and the acronym stands for transportation, inventory, movement, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing and defects. And when we look at the waste, which counts for 95% of everything that we do, it can be categorized in these areas. And our challenge is to seek out by looking and seeing on our sites where we see some of these instances of waste. So transportation, this could be using the wrong form of transport to bring materials or equipment into site. It could be transportation that comes to site empty to take waste away, or comes to site full and then leaves the site empty. We're missing an opportunity there to make best use of that transportation in bringing materials in and removal of waste at the same time. Inventory is all about looking at what materials we need on site at any given time. Do we have the right inventory placed in the right place on site to be used right first time? Movement is all about the movement of our people. How do our people use those materials to create what is required on the site? Whether it be concrete supply, laying a slab, or metal supply to create the rebar for the structure. Waiting is a key one for us as well. Waiting is all about how are we ensuring that our project plan has been collaboratively put together with our supply chain and our contractors to ensure that handoffs between one phase of the construction into another isn't held up at all. If we have QA checks or customer or client checks, how are we ensuring those checks are not holding up the process? Waiting could also be in the form of waiting for a sign-off for some materials to be brought onto site, or authorization to take on board the next phase of a project. So think about how do we ensure that we've got streamlined through from one phase to another. Overproduction. This is doing more than required, ahead of schedule. Overproduction can also be can affect all of the other wastes. Overproduction is what we see as the killer of all wastes. If we overproduce on something, it means we're potentially overprocessing because we're having to sign in or sign out materials. It means if we overproduce, we might have extra inventory on site that could get damaged. And we've got to think about how do we manage the space, the limited space that we have on our sites, so we've got the right inventory in the right place at the right time. And then finally, defects. Defects. These are things that don't go right first time. These are things that are brought to site that can't be used. These are things that have been stored in inventory somewhere and been damaged, either through the transportation or movement, or not being used when they should be used. I understand through a recent study that actually defects can be caused by, I understand from a recent research that 39% of all injuries on a construction site are caused by defects. And this is because we have to do the task again. So there's a good, strong correlation between getting things right first time and increasing safety on site. On this canvas that we've put together, we can use this after this lunch and learn as well. And I'll make sure there's a PDF copy available for each one of you that have joined the call. And I'll keep this canvas open so you can use it as reference. So some of the information we have on here, you can use for yourself in the future. So then, how do we identify with these wastes on site? So I've got an example here of a group of people coming together and starting to map their processes out. As we can see here, they've gathered lots of post-it notes on a brown paper that actually identifies their process steps. And as you can see, it's been done collaboratively with the people actually work on site. So a good way and a good method of identifying with where you can make improvements is by opening your eyes and learning to see what these wastes are on site. Not just at the level of project manager or black hat, but right the way down to the guys from the contractors doing the tasks. What do they plan to do? What's actually happening? And what's stopping them from doing the task in hand? What we typically see is things that stop them doing the task in hand will be identified within these 8 wastes. Okay then, so let's just have another look at what we've got on here from your value add, your non-value add, and your waste. So yes, design errors. How often do we start our contracts and find that the designs are either incorrect or incomplete, and we have to redo them again? Design freeze. Is that really a value add, or should that be put into the waste because it's seen as a potential waste of waiting? Off-site prefabrication. Absolutely. We're looking there at thinking what can be done on site and what can be done off site, which means the construction site is more effective and efficient. So once we've identified with our waste, whether they be value added, non-value added or waste, we've got to think about what are the steps that we can take to reduce that waste. So the way we look at this is if it's value add, the green, let's continue to do it. Let's capture that best practice. Let's share that across our teams, our projects, the supply chain and the contractors that we work with. It may be we need to put some form of checklist in there to ensure that the standards that we've identified are continued to be maintained. But it's our opportunity and our foundation to improve upon that continuously. So how would we do that? Well, we could have standards in place. And we've got here just some examples of some standard documents. Traditionally, we would use paper documents for our standards, whether it be a standard operating procedure, whether it be a standard combination table or work chart. And these documents can be used to capture the true essence of what we believe is the right thing to do, focusing on the key points of the process, the time we expect that process to take, and how that process looks in reality across the site that we have. These standard documents are also excellent training aids that can be used in inductions or for new people joining the team. We live now in a world of digital. So rather than just using paper documents for our standards that we can use to share best practice, there's an opportunity to use videos. Now, I won't play these at the moment, but these are here for you to reference later on. But the two videos I do have is a video that's been put together by an automotive organisation that changes headlight bulbs. Now, we can probably all relate to how difficult it is to change a headlight bulb in a car. So by the very nature of putting a simple standard together in a video that people can view, pause, have a go, and then review it again later, it makes it easy to ensure that we do the right thing right first time and ensure that we do it to the right standard. The second video down there is showing 8 steps to a perfect pizza. Now, I'm using these examples that are not construction based because we can draw into construction examples from other sectors and other marketplaces and learn from them about how do we build something simple into building a good standard that's understood by all. And this video around the 8 steps to creating an ideal pizza is just showing simple methods of making sure that quality is maintained, that time and productivity is maintained to ensure that the customer receives what they expected on time and in full. So that's one method of ensuring that we continue to do the value add. The next thing to consider is a non-value add. So these are the activities that we do that don't necessarily add value to the task, but they're necessary. So things like inductions of new people on site, things like payroll and HR functions, things like the processes of invoices to ensure that things are paid for on time so we get the materials and equipment required on site when we need them. Now, our challenge with these non-value added activities is not to stop doing them, but is to think about how do we identify where the wastes are, the things that stop us from performing our task efficiently, and then categorising them. And we can use that Tim Woods, that transport, inventory, motion, waiting over production, over process and defects as our method of categorisation to understand, well, what do we need to reduce? How do we improve the effectiveness of our transport on and off site? How do we improve the effectiveness of our processes so that we're doing the right thing right first time? And the challenge we have with non-value added work is to identify, categorise, and then work together to improve the situation. Waste. These are things that we shouldn't do. These are the things that are causing pain to our projects. These are the things that are affecting adversely the quality, the cost, and the overall delivery of our projects. And our challenge with waste is to, again, identify that waste, categorise it, and then eliminate it. Through the elimination of waste, it will enable then our value-added activities to take forefront in our minds. Whatever you're focusing on things that we shouldn't do, it's taking our attention away from things that we should do. And as we start to remove wasteful activities from our projects, we should share that and then also build that back into our new way of working, our standard documents, whether that be a process flow chart or a video that's explaining how a task should be done. So what I'd like to do now is you've shared with me so far some thoughts around your value added, your non-value added, and your waste on site. But what I'd like you to do now is just spend a few minutes and let me know some of the frustrations you currently face on your sites, some of the frustrations you currently face with your processes that stop you doing what you believe is right to deliver that project on time and in full. And if you spend a few seconds just putting your frustrations on there first, we can then start to explore these today, but also you can take these away after today's event and share them with your team. Reluctance to change, that is a frustration. And what we need to do is tap into, well, why are people reluctant to change? Is it just the fear of the unknown? I often think about two elements. We call it fear and shame. So the fear of the unknown, but also is a reluctance to change, the shame of, I put a process in place and I don't want to change because that's my process you're trying to change. So we've got to think about, how do we bring people to the party, so to speak, to say, how can we do things different? If you notice from the way we looked at the value add, non-value add and waste, my challenge wasn't how people do things well and on their expertise. My challenge is around what stops them being able to do what they know they do well. So our focus has got to move from being more efficient in the value add to actually removal of waste and stop doing what we shouldn't do. Buying cheap. Yes, think about, what is the cost of poor quality? So buying cheap up front might actually cost more quality problems later on in the project. And this is something that you might have to talk to with your planners and your procurement teams. Inductions, I agree. Within construction, we do have a high turnover of contractors and staff. So we've got to think about, how can we induct people in an efficient way into the process? And how do we keep them up to speed with what we're working on site? And this is where having potentially good digital standards and methods that we can share with people, we can actually speed up that induction process. Engage on change. Yes, it's all about engagement. So as I'm going through this workshop today in the Lunch and Learn, I'm trying to enable you as a group of people to say, what are your thoughts and what are our challenges? By doing that, we can work together on them. What you don't need is an expert in the field telling you exactly what you need to do to improve. Every organisation has different ways of working. You all have different values and behaviours within your business. And that engagement of your business will help you understand what change needs to happen to be effective for you. Not understanding the needs of internal customers. That's a really good point. And I mentioned earlier on about value stream mapping, mapping out your process. If you have a good method of seeing your processes, seeing who is involved with those processes, you can then start to understand the needs of your internal customers and suppliers. And by the very nature of understanding those needs, you can then start to work together collaboratively to improve the situation. So let's have a look at some of the opportunities that you have there. So engagement with supply chain, absolutely. Early engagement with the supply chain is key to removal of waste. It will stop us duplicating effort and having to chase, which is a wasteful activity. Collaborative hosting to drive and support lean activities. Yes, and for those that don't know what the word hosting means, it's all about, what is a strategy within your organisation? What is driven at the very top of your organisation that drives the values and behaviours across your organisation? And if that's understood by all, about what is the reasoning for your business existence, it will help you understand how you identify with the actions that you take. And that in itself will support that change in behaviours required to support the business to improve, to look at those wastes and remove them. Value engineering, absolutely. And using maybe value engineering aligned with looking at the failure modes of your processes and your designs. And by doing that value engineering and looking at some of the failures that have happened in the past, we can design for the future and remove some of the recurring waste that we have. Changing other people's perceptions and habits, I agree, but that comes from understanding what their perceptions and habits are in the first place and what's driving those behaviours. So think about, how do we utilise our people in the best way? And again, by doing that, we're removing one of those ways linked to skills. Trusted relationships is key. And I mentioned right at the very start of this Lunch and Learn that it's been brought to you in partnership between LC International and Supply Chain School. So having those trusted partnerships that work together to deliver on project to their agreed values is key. Somebody said he's really wanted to identify with the standard cultures there, so I'll just make that one a little bit smaller. So it's about standardizing cultures potentially as well. Make sure that everybody knows how we should work together, and maybe contract within yourselves what that looks like. So we talked about frustrations and opportunities, and we looked at categorization of waste. And I keep mentioning around the go, look and see. So go to the site to see, to deeply understand. So we should use these methods of observation to identify where those wastes are. These types of sheets can be given out to anybody within the business. We can ask them to do a regular check or site walk round to understand how people are working, what challenges they're facing. And it's all about that interval of how often do we check to what action we take. So I've got some examples here based around the classic waste observations, but some of you may not be working within the construction site itself. You may be part of the supporting functions that enable that construction to take place. And with that in mind, we've developed here what we call a service waste observation sheet. And it looks at it in very much the same way as the traditional Tim Woods acronym. But it looks at it in things that you will see from a service, specifically around delay or unnecessary movement, or if there's any duplication in effort, maybe inputting information into a number of platforms or spreadsheets. Thinking about the errors that are made from the information that's given to you as a back office function that's supporting the delivery of that project. Thinking about how you're dealing with inventory of work. Maybe you work in the IT function and you work on a ticketed system around ensuring that the IT is working correctly for people to deliver those projects in full. And then the final one there is around unclear communication. So how often do we end up doing the wrong thing because we don't have the correct information around us? As we start to think about what actions to take, it's very good practice to create a form of action plan and think about what can we do to ensure that what we've agreed to do is understood by all, who's involved with it, when it will happen, what the status is, and what the committees that we're going to take from that. So as you start to think about what waste you have on site, how you're going to work together to remove those wastes, think about creating that action plan of what that looks like, when it's going to happen, and who's going to be involved. You can also use this action plan as an understanding of what has happened in the past to remove that waste and non-value added activity. And that can be used then as best practice to share with the rest of your business. Okay then, so we're going to look now at improving resource efficiency. So we've looked at the removal of waste. We've looked at our focus on waste rather than just the value add, because it's the waste that stops us achieving. So improving resource efficiency. Again, identify with your process. Think about going out onto site. Think about working with the different contractors to understand what part of the processes they're working on and how they're working together to deliver that project. Use process mapping, as we've displayed in the example above there, by bringing the people together and allowing them to see each other, how those processes come together, because waste will be found in between the processes, the handoffs from one trade to another. Check to ensure that process requirements are being followed and adhered to. So I mentioned earlier on, once you've got an agreed way of working and everybody's happy and signed into that, that should form your standard work, your approach, the way that you do business. Ensure that people understand that, because that standard will drive quality. It will drive managed costs, and it will ensure that your delivery happens on time in full every time. And if you have that documented standard and things do go wrong, you can then start to reference that standard and say, okay, then, if it's gone wrong, why? Have we followed the standard? And if the answer is yes, and you're still failing or something has gone wrong, it may be that your standard needs updating. There may be a new method or procedure or way of working. Or somebody may have found a more efficient way of doing something. If you're not following the standard, the first thing I would do is follow that standard. So if you find there are gaps and things going wrong and people are not following that standard, reiterate the standard to them and say, let's follow this to see why things have gone wrong. Think about working with your teams to understand the frustrations and potential opportunities, as we've done here today on our Miro board. So when looking at opportunities to improve, we don't have to always look at those 8 wastes and the categorisation of that first. We can start that conversation by asking people what stops them from doing what they believe is right, and then use that as a starting point to improve. Then use the categorisation of the waste to say, where should our focus be? Do we need to have a focus on quality and defects within our business first? Or do we need to think about how do we transport more efficiently to ensure that we're meeting things like our carbon footprint, if that's something that's important to us as an organisation? Once you've identified with good ways of working, a method of improving that resource efficiency is about sharing best current practices. So everybody within the team is working with that best standard. They're all delivering that work in the same way. I'm going to show you a video now, and the video lasts just for a couple of minutes. And in the video, I will not play it with sound, it'll be quiet, but you'll see the transition between a team that used to do the pit stops for the Formula One in the 60s and how it's changed to how it works now. And what we can do is we can take learning from other industries and bring this thought process into the construction industry. So I'll just play this video for you now. Here, see the pit stop in the 1950s. See that the team here are taking what we would see as an inordinate amount of time just to change a wheel. The nut didn't come off efficiently. It took a lot of knocking. We've got one person doing the task and moving around the car. We've got a number of people stood around waiting. The focus may have changed from the past to where we are now, in the fact that in the past, it was all about ensuring the car was ready, but not necessarily time focused. Whereas now, with the pit stops that we have in the Formula One, it's all about getting the car turned around as quickly as possible. So we'll see now an example of the pit stop from 2013. And it will have taken less than about 10 seconds to complete. You can see the preparation is key. We've got multiple activities all taking place at the same time. The car comes in. Everybody has a task to do. They're all working to the same standard. And as soon as it's finished, they move on and prepare for the next pit stop. So preparation is key. But think about how we can learn from other industries within construction and bring that thought process into our industry. What is our preparation like? Do we prepare enough? Do we think about that preparation before the task needs to be completed? Part of our cycle around improving waste is about following a cycle of PDCA, which stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act. So do we have a robust plan that everybody's bought into? Do we execute that plan as agreed? And do we understand the gaps between plan versus actual? So what we plan to do, did it actually happen? And if it did, good. Let's learn from that and do it again and replicate for the future and share that best practice with other organisations or other people within our organisation. And if we didn't, let's not forget the CA, the Check Act of Plan, Do, Check, Act, and ensure that we check and understand what the gaps were between our plan versus actual, and then ensure that we take action. So as I mentioned before, around taking action around removal of waste and using an action plan, if we think about that PDCA cycle, that in itself will also improve our efficiency in delivering what is expected right first time. So tracking. I mentioned there Plan, Do, Check, Act. We have a plan. We execute the plan. The Check Act is about ensuring we've got the right metrics around ourselves to ensure we take the appropriate action. So we can use those wastes that we've seen earlier on in the Tim Woods around what things do we need to remove to ensure that we're more efficient. But what we can also do is think about what things are we tracking as an organisation. And I've put together a very, very simple run chart based around 4 phases of a construction build. I've started to understand lead times in number of weeks, what the potential right first time has been, the costs of material and the labour costs associated. And as you can see, as lead time comes down, as we start to invest in improvements, so do the total costs and so do the labour costs associated to what we're working with there. As we start to improve, we can start to focus our thought processes around what's taking us away from plan. What was our percentage plan complete? And what do we need to focus on next with the removal of wastes? I've here now captured some examples around different levels of capturing information and data. So where do we focus our attention? We could use this process to think about the waste that we have on site. Where do the waste lie? And I've got an example here around quality. And if our waste is on quality or not right first time, how do we then break that down into where we see that quality issue? And using what we call a Pareto principle, which identifies very quickly the top issues that we need to focus on. So here, in this example, we've got some focus on around the wiring from the electrical department or the people that are building potentially the framework to the buildings. We can then break that down into a further level to understand, well, what does that look like in specific task? So think about how you're using information that's around you, that's gathered by your business, not just to identify with the waste, but to remove them as well. Now, as an organisation, LC International, we've identified with our approach to thinking about how we consider putting improvement into place. And I'd like to just quickly share with you our approach here. And this is something that you can use yourselves. So think about, as you go through your journey of change, how you're assessing the current situation. Think about who you need to get involved, identifying with the current situation, what waste you have within your organisation. Thinking about what it is you're wanting to achieve as a business. Is it improving on quality? Is it reduction in lead time? Is it improvement of productivity and people efficiency? Once you understand through that assessment, think about how you align your teams, both internal and the extended teams in your supply chain and contractor base. How do you align them in getting them to understand what is important for you to function to deliver that project in full? Then the Amplify is about agreeing that way of working together. It's about identifying with those improvements that you want to take forward together and creating those key actions that you can take collaboratively to ensure that you're efficient and effective in delivering those improvements. So if you have a focus on a specific waste, think about how you're going to work together across that supply chain to improve that situation. And then finally, the acceleration, the way we look at this is about how do we build that sustainment in? How do we ensure that with what we set out to do continues? That as a supply chain, that you take that from one project into a future project and you continue to learn and grow together. So think about these 4 simple steps aligned to what we've gone through today. How are you assessing the current situation? How are you aligning the teams that you're working with around a common approach and thinking? How you're amplifying and ensuring that people are working together so you're building momentum and creating that continuous improvement cycle. And then finally, how do you make it stick? How do you ensure that the acceleration and the continuous improvement cycle continues to grow and grow from one project into another? So that's brought me to the end of what I wanted to cover today around the waste, efficiencies, and improvement cycle. And I'd just like to share with you some of the things that you could potentially expect to see as improvements from taking on this approach. So around quality, it's about making sure things are right first time. From cost, it's about removal of those wastes so that you can adhere to those budgets and potentially do more with less. It's about productivity. It's about ensuring that what we do is better quality. It's at the right pace. And as we say, they're leaner. We've removed the waste from our process. And ultimately, by identifying with all of those areas, we can deliver what we need to do on time and improve that safety. And taking them away from what we do day to day. So I'd like to just hand over to yourselves now. Okay, while we're just waiting for the question. Oh, we've got a comment there that's just come on there. Let's have a look. Yes, I agree there. A good point there from Deborah King. So as we start to think about removing waste, we need to think about, we may need to look at different technologies, different platforms out there, and there may be an investment required to ensure that what we have is actually bringing better to our industry. So around the myth that lean is about reducing headcount, it isn't about reducing headcount. Lean and lean thinking and removal of waste is about having the right headcount for the task in hand. And if you remove wastes, it allows the headcount that you have to become more productive and effective in delivering the value add. So it's ensuring that everybody's doing the right thing at the right time. Okay. So lean isn't about increasing or reducing headcount. It's about having the right people with the right skill functioning performing the value add activities and not the waste activities. So as everybody's just thinking about some points or question answer, I'd just like to bring your attention to the feedback that we have. So that can be accessed through the link that we have on the Miro, and Mia's also added that link through onto the chat function of Zoom. And please feel free to fill this simple feedback form in, which will help us understand how you felt about this Lunch and Learn and what we need to consider for future Lunch and Learns that we have that we'll bring to you through the Supply Chain School. Can I also just make the team from HE Sim aware that if you've been joining us from HE Sim, please could you just add the letters HES into question 9 of the feedback, because the team there wants to just understand how you as an organisation felt about this Lunch and Learn, so that you can potentially use this again for yourselves in the future. Okay, so thank you very much for your time today on this Lunch and Learn. I will keep the call open for a few more minutes just in case there are any more questions coming through. But other than that, if there's anything else I can support and help you with, my contact details are here, and we'll be sharing this presentation as a PDF, and you'll still have access to this canvas after this event for your use. So thank you very much for your time today, and I hope that this Lunch and Learn has been informative and also gets you to challenge the thinking around what waste you have on site and what actions you could potentially take. So we've got a question there. So we want to add value to any waste. Well, we don't want to add value to any waste. What we want to do is potentially look at removal of waste. So where do you start as a team? That's a really good question. It's about getting your team together. It's about thinking about those waste walks, going and seeing on your site to actually look at what's actually happening. These sheets that I have here on the Miro board around observations, these are a good starting point to talk with your team on around what do they see that's stopping them doing what they believe is right. The frustrations that I ask you to pull together and the opportunities is also a good starting point with your team to say, okay then, how's today been? Has it been a good day or a bad day? Talk to me a bit about your frustrations that stopped you doing what you believe was right. What would you do differently if you had the opportunity? And that's a really good starting point with understanding where the wastes are and what actions you can take. Once you've done that with your people and your teams, categorize it in these wastes, and then agree as a team which one, how you're going to start to manage the improvement or challenge those issues you're facing within these wastes. So if it's a transportation issue, bringing the materials on site, think about how you're working with your logistics suppliers. Think about how they're bringing the materials on site, how those materials are being brought on site, how are they staged, where are they placed? Are they placed where they're needed at point of use, or are the movements that you have to make as a business to get them to the point of use? Think about how those materials are presented. How do you work with supply chain to ensure that they present them how you want to use them, as opposed to presenting them in the best way for them to be delivered? So think about all of those elements as well around the transport and the waste. Do I think that the standard of logistics in construction will improve? It will, if there is that collaboration between the next line in the value stream. So if we, as a customer of the logistics, don't raise the issues that we face and how we want things presented, the logistics will not improve. We've got to work and be very open and honest with them and work collaboratively to say, how can we work together to improve the situation that we're in? So that's the way I would look at that. Get them involved when you start to map out that process of your project and what it looks like and who's involved. don't just think about the contractors doing the build. Think about the supply chain and the logistics bringing the materials in, and work with them to understand how you want that material brought in. Is it in larger articulated loads, or is it in smaller day-by-day deliveries? Do you want the logistics teams to bring you in packages of materials so that you can do elements of the construction in one go without having inventory lying around? So think about how you involve that supply chain to ensure that they're helping you with the construction and not causing you more work on site. Okay, any other thoughts or questions before we bring the call to an end?
I don't know whether I was supposed to be speaking on here, but my name's Darren Wilson, originally from the automotive industry, logistics strategy manager from Land Rover, chartered member for the Institute of Logistics and Transport. Just one thing I want to point out through my experience is that the logistics courses within the construction industry don't represent what we're trying to do in the lean content. That's why I was asking the question of, do you think the logistics is going to improve in the future?
And again, it will only improve if we start to take some learnings from other markets and sectors. Like yourself, I'm from automotive and aerospace, and some of the challenges I see in construction is they just accept the way it is, as opposed to working with the supply chain to make it happen for them. So I recall working with Jaguar Land Rover myself in the supply of componentry into one of their factories, and the very nature of their lines and the way they built, because they then shared it with us as a supplier, we could then supply in to meet the needs of their delivery lines, as opposed to just meeting the needs of us getting product out of our factory. And I think we need to look at that with the construction industry to say, okay, then what does that plan look like of the things we need on site? And how do we share that with logistics and the supply chain to ensure that they can build that platform to enable that to happen?
Yeah, I was, as I say, the standard of the courses, because when I look at for construction logistics courses online for my staff, there don't seem to be an awful lot available other than CPC and some really basic stuff. But the art of logistics is a driver for value added, you know, marketplaces at the workplace, delivering to point of fit, the collaboration that you was talking about with the supply chain in the pre-construction phase, so everybody's aware of what's going on, how much material is required at certain stages. But there don't seem to be a very good understanding of that, including consolidation, delivering in from consolidation, drip feed, etc.
I agree. I think what I'd be interested in is, if you'd like to make contact after this call, it would be great to follow this up with you, because I'm sure we can work together as with the supply chain school to understand what do we need to do to start to push and drive this within the industry. Because again, the supply chain school is all about innovation. It's about taking the lead. So please, if you'd like to be involved in that, please drop me a line or Mia at the supply chain school, and we can take that forward.
Yeah, I'm already doing, because I'm a chartered member for the Institute of Logistics and Transport. I sit on a number of steering committees, sort of Transport for London, for construction logistics, and various other ones. But as I say, the drive for me is from the education at grassroots level. So I'm associated with Salford University, trying to look at the construction logistics that they're doing to see whether it's fit for purpose. Not everybody can do the things that I come from an M&E contractor. You know, the parts are smaller, so it's more like a manufacturing environment. So we can do a lot of things that are encompassed within the lean philosophy. But I understand that some of the bigger items for the, you know, the principal contractor, rebar and concrete pours, you know, they can be planned better, obviously, but we don't have that same opportunity as we do as in an M&E contracts world.
No, I get that, and thank you very much for that. I agree.
Yeah, if I can take your details, I'm more than willing to follow this up afterwards. That'd be great.
Perfect. So I've just put my details on there as well onto the Miro board, and I'll also add my details to the chat if anybody wants to get in touch after this call.
Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much for the question and the challenge. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for your time today, and thank you for attending the Lunch and Learn around reducing waste. And I will look forward to sharing the information we have on this board with you after this event. So again, thank you very much for your time today.